Once upon a time, in a small African town called Lakala, I lived as a young, beautiful, shy girl named Amy. I was only 15 years old and lived with my mother in a very humble house. I always found it hard to make friends and was very socially conscious, which only made things more challenging. I attended a school called Starlight Academy in the city of Malango. However, my classmates didn't welcome me, as they thought I looked old and ridiculous. Many wondered why someone like me would even be enrolled in their school in the first place. No one wanted to share a desk with me because they thought I looked funny and odd. Everyone's eyes would linger on me with a strange disgust. Because of that, I was never popular at school, and I was often bullied by a girl named Luna and her friends. I was overly shy and socially awkward. The only time I would speak to boys was if they were talking to me about classwork. When I said something, they would either roll their eyes, ignore me, or cut me off to speak to someone else. I was an easy target because I never stood up for myself. I wore glasses, had a very long uniform, and was painfully shy. Everyone knew they could say anything about me, and I wouldn't do anything to defend myself. They took advantage of me because they thought I was a ridiculous girl. Fortunately, I had a best friend named Bella. She shared similar personality traits with me, and despite everything happening around us, at least we had each other. I had a secret crush on one of the popular, handsome guys named Dante. Sadly, Dante was also Luna's boyfriend. One Monday morning, as I was heading to class, I saw Luna and Dante kissing, and I couldn't help but imagine myself in Luna's place because I really liked him. Whenever I looked at him, I would always melt and smile. But that day, seeing Dante with another girl made me feel very bad, especially since he didn't even know I had feelings for him. That day, I went up against Dante in a debate competition. He was very confident and managed to get everyone to cheer for him with his opinions. But when it was my turn, I started speaking, and the entire class began laughing at me. Humiliated, I ran out of the room as everyone made fun of me. One fateful day, as I was leaving the classroom, one of my classmates, a short boy named Nico, decided to harass me. He always acted tough to make up for his size. I wasn't a fighter, so I tried my best to avoid him. But Nico kept begging me to let him copy my work. Frustrated, I said, "Please, Nico, we've all been taught this and we all have brains. Just do it yourself throughout the rest of the class." He continued to threaten me, calling me a little good-for-nothing girl, and promised to deal with me. I did my best to ignore him, but his refusal to stop harassing me was beginning to wear me down. After class, I placed my books in my locker and began heading to my next class. But then Nico confronted me in the hallway. He had a cast on his right hand from punching a wall at home. Suddenly, he swung his cast at me, hitting me hard. He then punched the back of my head with his fist. It hurt, but I kept walking away. A little bit later, when I turned around, I saw Nico running after me. Panicked, I ran as fast as I could until I lost sight of him. I was so scared that I didn't even attend my next class that day. After losing sight of Nico, I hid by the corner of an unfinished building, tears streaming down my face, feeling a sense of overwhelming sadness and helplessness. Why does nobody love me? Am I cursed? Why do bad things keep happening to me? God, please take me away from this earth. I can't deal with this anymore. I am so tired, just tired, I whispered to myself. After crying for what seemed like forever, I wiped away my tears and went home. When I saw my mother, I pretended like everything was fine because I didn't want her to worry. But then she surprised me by saying, "Your grandmother on your father's side has come to Lakala and wishes to meet you." I was confused. Why does my grandmother want to meet me all of a sudden, especially when she's never bothered to contact me before? I wondered. I hope there's nothing wrong because I've already been through a lot today, I thought. My mother handed me a slip of paper with my grandmother's address. "Please, my daughter, I know you're confused, but go and meet her. Hear what she has to say," she urged me. I was hesitant but didn't have a choice. I took the address, feeling frustrated, and went to my room. The next day after school, I went to the address and found myself standing in front of a massive mansion. A butler welcomed me and led me to my grandmother, Lady Zara. To my utter shock, she revealed that she was actually the Queen of Illyrian, a prestigious African kingdom. She then explained that my father, who had recently passed away, was the Crown Prince of Illyrian, which made me the next in line to the throne. At first, I thought it was all a joke, but as I pieced everything together, I realized she was serious. I was beyond shocked to find out that I was actually a princess, now responsible for an entire kingdom. My grandmother told me, "You have to move to Illyrian and become an entirely different person than you are now." Overwhelmed by this revelation, I refused to be a princess and ran away. When I returned home, I confronted my mother, feeling betrayed. "Mom, how could you keep this from me all these years? Why did you hide such a big truth from me?" She looked at me sadly and said, "My daughter, I know how you feel right now, but I had no other option. We had to keep it a secret for your safety." Her words struck me hard. "Mom, you don't know what I've been going through at school. Maybe if you knew, you would have told me sooner that I'm actually royalty." She sighed and said, "I'm so sorry." I ran to my room in frustration, crying. The next day, my grandmother, and I had a serious conversation. My grandmother wanted to introduce me as the princess to the world, but insisted I first train to act like royalty. Although I was initially against the idea, my mother persuaded me to attend the princess classes and then decide. I reluctantly agreed but kept everything a secret. From that day forward, I was under strict guidance. The queen assigned a guard named Kai to ensure my safety until I was formally declared a princess. They even gifted me a luxurious car for my school commute. On one of those days, I decided to pick up Bella on my way to school. Bella was mesmerized by the car and asked, "Mai, what's going on? Why is such a beautiful, expensive car dropping you off?" But I just smiled and didn't answer her. After school, I took the car for repairs, and I was shocked when the mechanic told me it would cost about 400 kwa. Bella's brother, Liam, who worked there, had always liked me but never approached me. He watched as I sorted out the car repair, but I barely noticed his presence. Later that day, I went to the mansion for my first princess lesson. My grandmother introduced me to a stylist named Cyrus, who would do a complete makeover on me. He complimented me on my natural beauty, though his expression suggested he was holding back. Cyrus and his assistants plucked my eyebrows, straightened my hair, and gave me facials and manicures. They even broke my glasses and made me wear contact lenses. By the end of it, I looked completely different. My grandmother, Lady Zara, was impressed with my transformation but strictly instructed Cyrus and his team to keep the makeover a secret. The following day, I picked up Bella for school, and she was utterly shocked at my new look. "Ami, what happened to you?" she asked, looking at me as if she didn't recognize me. She seemed a little sad, possibly fearing I was turning into one of the mean girls at school. Despite this, we arrived at school and immediately, all eyes were on me. Even Dante seemed to take an interest in me now, and the reactions from everyone were overwhelming. Later in class, Luna couldn't resist the urge to bully me despite my new look. She walked over and pulled off my hat, letting my hair cascade down. The entire classroom fell silent as my hair shimmered in the light, cascading down my shoulders. Everyone stared in awe, their eyes wide with amazement. Even the teacher stopped to look. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and I quickly tried to cover my hair with my hands, but whispers and murmurs filled the room. I tried to ignore them and decided I'd wear my hat the next day to avoid the attention. Not long after, Bella's brother Liam invited me to a music concert he was performing in. He was so passionate about music, and I could tell he really hoped I'd come to watch him. I promised to attend, but admittedly I was dismissive, not realizing how much my support might mean to him. The next morning, as I reached school, I was swarmed by reporters asking me questions about being a princess. The secret had somehow gotten out, and I immediately suspected Bella, thinking she might have told people. Heartbroken and feeling betrayed, I confronted her, saying, "Bella, why would you do this?" "I thought you were my friend." Bella looked hurt, saying, "Amy, please, you know I'd never betray you. I didn't tell anyone, I swear." Although her words seemed sincere, I was still doubtful, leaving the conversation unresolved. As the situation spiraled, my grandmother, Lady Zara, decided to come to the school to address what had happened. After investigating, she discovered that my stylist, Cyrus, was the one who leaked my royal status to the media, all in an attempt to claim his own fame. Furious, my grandmother fired him immediately. Once things were settled, she invited me to a royal dinner that night, where she wanted to introduce me to high-ranking royals. I felt nervous but was determined to make a good impression. At first, the dinner went smoothly. However, I accidentally knocked over a candle, setting a guest's sleeve on fire. In a panic, I threw an ice bucket onto the flames, only to trip over a server and cause a tray of fruit to spill onto the guests. My grandmother, watching everything unfold, held her head in her hands. Thankfully, the guests were good-natured and laughed it off, but I was mortified and began to doubt whether I was suited for this life. The next day, though, Lady Zara surprised me by canceling her meetings to spend time with me. She took me to the amusement park, played games, took photos with me, and even tried my favorite foods. For the first time, I felt truly loved and accepted. On the way home, she let me drive, but while climbing a steep slope, the brakes failed, and I accidentally crashed into a famous statue crowded with people. The police arrived, ready to arrest me, but my grandmother spoke so persuasively that the officers let us go, even arranging a driver to take us home. Watching her handle everything so gracefully, I realized just how incredible a queen she was. When I returned to school the next day, I was surrounded by kids asking for autographs. I had gone from being invisible to the talk of the school. Even Luna, who had always bullied me, pretended to be my friend when the reporters were around. Dante, my longtime crush, finally asked me to go to a beach party with him that weekend, and I agreed, not realizing his intentions weren't sincere. Later that evening, I apologized to Liam for missing his concert, but he seemed distant and hurt, thinking I was ignoring him for Dante. My mother warned me, saying, "Ami, remember, Dante wasn't interested in you until he found out you were a princess," but I ignored her advice, caught up in my own feelings. At the beach party, everything seemed perfect for the first few hours until reporters crashed the event, looking for me. Dante and I hid in a small shack, where he tried to kiss me. Something didn't feel right, so I pulled away, but he forcefully kissed me in front of the media, giving them something to talk about. Then, Luna and her friends tricked me into changing clothes in a tent and invited the paparazzi to snap photos of me in just a towel, which made headlines the next day. Humiliated, I went home and cried in my mother's arms, feeling completely defeated. The following morning, the scandalous photos were all over the news, with cruel headlines questioning my worth as a princess. The queen was furious, and I was devastated, doubting myself even more. "Maybe I'm not fit to be a princess," I confessed to Lady Zara. But she comforted me, saying, "This will pass. People will forget in time." That evening, my grandmother handed me a diary my father had left for me. "Your father loved you dearly," she told me, her voice soft with emotion. Reading his words, I felt closer to him, even though he was no longer with us. Overwhelmed with guilt and responsibility, I ran to my room, feeling that the burden was too great. In a moment of despair, I packed my bags, planning to run away from it all. As I packed, a letter slipped from the diary, written by my father. In it, he spoke of courage and resilience, urging me to face my challenges head-on. His words touched me deeply, and I realized I couldn't just give up. Determined, I decided to attend the royal party and give my speech as planned. It was raining heavily that evening, but I was resolute. I drove through the storm, but halfway there, my car broke down. Just when I was about to lose hope, Liam arrived in his car. Realizing the apology pizza I'd sent earlier had been from me, he had come to support me. Together, we made it to the party just in time. As I entered the hall, drenched and exhausted, I saw Lady Zara giving a speech. She noticed me, smiled, and stepped aside to let me take the stage. Terrified, I looked at the crowd, my heart pounding. I started to stammer, but then remembered my father's words about courage. Gathering my strength, I gave my speech, announcing myself proudly as the Princess of Ilarion. The crowd applauded, and at that moment, I finally felt worthy of my title. After my speech, I was officially crowned as the princess. I changed into a beautiful gown and shared a dance with Liam, who had stood by me through everything. Together, we stepped out into the garden, where he expressed his feelings for me, and we shared a heartfelt kiss, marking the beginning of something special. From that day forward, I embraced my royal responsibilities with pride, knowing that my journey, though filled with challenges, had shaped me into who I was meant to be. This is my story, a tale of transformation, courage, and self-discovery. Thank you for listening, and I hope it inspires you as much as it has inspired me. Until next time, goodbye.